Hey, I'm Corey.
And I'm Maureen, and you're watching
Sunday service at the River.
Let's do this!
What's up, River Church? It's me, Joel. Happy Sunday. It's my favorite day of the week, and I'm excited that you're watching the River Church Online with us today. I've got some exciting things to tell you. Starting on September 12th, on Saturdays at 5 p.m. at the First United Methodist Church in Watauga, we're actually going to be starting to have some services. So we want to invite you guys out. If you have any questions regarding our services, check out our digital communication card that's in the description of the video, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube. Send it to us. We can answer those questions for you. We're really excited, and we're so grateful to the First United Methodist Church Watauga. They've been generous and allowing us a space to meet, and so we're really excited about that. So we hope to see you there, again, starting September 12th. The other thing you should be getting excited about is our new series coming up called You Asked For It. Okay, this is a series where you submit questions and things you want to hear Pastor Mike talk about, and you can do that again with our digital communication card in the description of the video. So fill that out, send that in, and it was probably one of our most popular and exciting series last year, and so we want to do it again. And so fill that out, send in your questions or what you want to hear spoken about, and can't wait to see what you guys send in. If you want to worship with us this morning with your tithes and offerings, you can do that at our website at theriverdfw.com. If you want to be a part of Heart for the House, where we're raising funds for a building, you can do that at our website as well. We're really excited about the future for the River Church. We hope to see you on Saturday nights, and I believe that the message today, the worship today, is going to speak to me. It's going to speak to you. So let's just open our hearts and receive the word that God has for us today.
know you, God. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one that could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one that could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And a holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart
Well, good morning, River Church. We've come to the end of our journey through the book of Habakkuk. I hope it's been encouraging and helpful for you. I hope it's deepened your faith. I know for poor Habakkuk, it's been tough, right? It's been a wrestling match with his faith, with learning to trust God. And if you remember, the book of Habakkuk is basically conversations and really prayers from Habakkuk to God, and then God responding back to Habakkuk. In week 1, we saw as Habakkuk prayed to God for the first time, just talking about the wickedness of his nation and the sin of his nation, and asking God to come in and do something about it, to come in and change it, to heal his land, to turn his land back to God the Father. And then in week 2, God responds and says, you know what, Habakkuk, I'm going to do that. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to send the Babylonians in, the Babylonian Empire. They're going to conquer you, but through all that, guess what? I'm going to redeem you, and I'm going to redeem your nation. And then we saw week 3, Habakkuk's response saying basically, that is not a good idea. Like that, they're the worst. They're an evil people. How could you let the Babylonians even thrive and survive? They're terrible people. How could you let them conquer us? I don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't like it, which I think we can probably relate to. There's probably been a lot of moments in our lives where we've looked at some of God's responses and gone, God, I don't like it. I don't understand it. I don't want it. But then God responds back to Habakkuk last week as we saw him say, Habakkuk, you've got to walk by faith. You got to trust me. You and the Israelite nation have to trust me. And we ended last week with God telling Habakkuk that he will deal with the Babylonian Empire on his own time, but for now they are a tool in his hands to correct and heal the Israelite people, the nation of Judah. And the Israelites are going to have to learn to walk in faith. Today we're going to see Habakkuk's final response and prayer to God. And we're going to see him finally take all these things to heart. He responds, or he's going to respond in a way that is completely different than how we've actually seen him respond in the previous 4 weeks, right? No arguments, no complaining, no telling God what to do or what he thinks God should do. He responds simply with a song of worship, which is honestly incredible, right? It's really the last thing that we would have expected, especially the way that he had been responding and had been handling all this news. He worships, he sings a song of praise, and maybe you're at home watching this day and you're thinking, well, how can he praise right now, right? Nothing's changed, nothing's different, right? Judah and the Israelites are still going to be taken into exile. They're still going to be conquered. They're still going to face terrible pain and suffering. How can Habakkuk make this turn and suddenly praise God and worship God right now? Because if we're honest, right, that's the last thing that we would think would be natural for Habakkuk. That's the last thing we would think Habakkuk would want to do. But let's look at his response and see, like, how is he able to do this? And I'm going to read Habakkuk chapter 3, starting in verse 1. He says, a prayer of the prophet Habakkuk according to Shigionoth. Now, I don't know if that's how you say that word or not, but that's how I'm going to pronounce it. And we think of this word's important. The reason I'm talking about it is because Shigionoth is a musical tone or a musical setting, we believe. And so it's kind of like saying, basically, hey, I'm about to sing this song. It's in the key of G. So I don't know if it's the key of G, but this is what basically that means is, hey, here's the song we're about to sing. Here's the setting. Here's the tune. Here's the key. And so he starts this off. And now in verse 2, he begins singing this song. He says, Lord, I have heard the report about you. Lord, I stand in awe of your deeds. Revive your work in these years. Make it known in these years, and in your wrath, remember mercy. So he opens up this song with a simple phrase, Lord, I've heard reports about you, and I stand in awe of your deeds. Now, over the last few weeks, we've seen Habakkuk having these challenging conversations with God. Like these deep, honest, real conversations with God. And through these conversations that he's been having with God, through this time experiencing God, he's really gained a deeper knowledge and a deeper understanding about the nature of God, about the ways of God, about who God is. And so Habakkuk, has come through this experience and has been changed by this experience with the Lord, right? He says, hey, I've seen or I've heard of you before, but now I've seen your works. I've seen how you move. I've seen how you do things, God. And he says, I can worship now because I've experienced the Lord, and in this trial, in these conversations, I've come out changed. I've come out different. And one of the really cool things and one of the good things, the benefits that we experience when we walk through difficult seasons, when we walk through suffering, is that if we choose in that suffering to go to the Lord, to rely on the Lord, to experience the Lord, then He will walk with us. He will change us, right? He will help us. He will guide us, and we begin to experience Him and know Him deeper. And it's similar to what Job says in Job 42, 5 and 6. He says, hey, I've heard rumors about you, but now my eyes have seen you, right? In moments like this and what Habakkuk has been walking through, we see God in a deeper way than we usually have before. We experience His love and His power and His presence in a different way than we have before, because we're walking through suffering and pain and we're choosing to go to Him and rely on Him, and He heals us and walks with us in a different way than if we were just normally walking through life with no problems or issues or pain, right? It's the difference here in this moment between knowing about something and knowing something through experience, okay? It's like the difference between life before you had kids and life after you had kids, right? Because before you had kids, don't lie, some of you guys, myself included, would look at other people who had kids and go, my kids will never do that, right? No. My kids will never talk to me like that. My kids will never act like that. My kids will never watch TV like that. Are you kidding me? And then all of a sudden you're exhausted, you're tired, and you're like, I need a break. And you're like, please just watch TV for a few hours, right? Please, here, go, right? That's the reality, right? That's the difference between looking at something without knowledge and understanding and walking through something with experience. Experience changes it, right? Knowing about something and knowing something through experience are very different. And so Habakkuk, through this time, is experiencing the Lord in a different, in a deeper way than he has before, because, and I don't want you to miss this, River Church, this is important, because he's choosing to press into God. He's choosing to even challenge God and talk to God and seek God. Even if he doesn't like the answers, he's pushing in, he's pressing in. And in his experience, he's understanding God more, seeing God more, going deeper with God in his relationship, and he's been changed because of it. He's a different person at the end of this than he was in the beginning. Habakkuk is a different person in chapter 4 here, or chapter 3, than he was in chapter 1, right? He's being changed by God. And sometimes that change happens in difficult seasons and circumstances, and it's not a good change. But in order for the change to be a good one, he has to allow himself to be changed and transformed and challenged because of his experience with God, not by the circumstances, right? Not by the suffering. Those are two very different things. Let me say it again in a different way, because I think it's important. In our seasons of suffering or pain or uncertainty, we must press into God, seek Him, chase Him, talk to Him, hear from Him, argue with Him, experience Him, right? So that experience with God would be the catalyst for our transformation, not the pain or the suffering, right? We want to be changed and transformed by God because of the way we've walked through the pain and suffering with Him, not because of what the pain and suffering has done to us, right? Those are different. We want to allow God to use the pain and suffering to heal, transform, change us because of what He's doing in us, not the pain and suffering alone, right? I think that's a very important distinction. And so Habakkuk is singing and he's praising God because he's pressed into God. He's walking through this experience, and God has changed him, and He is healing him and walking deeper with him, right? And so he continues on here, verse 3. It says, God comes from Teman, the Holy One from Mount Paran, Selah. His splendor covers the heavens, and the earth is full of His praise. His brilliance is like light. His brilliance is like light rays are flashing from His hand, and this is where His power is hidden. Plague goes before Him, and pestilence follows in His steps. He stands and shakes up the earth, and He looks and startles the nations. The age-old mountains break apart. The ancient hills sink down. His pathways are ancient. I see the tents of Cushan in distress, the tent curtains in the land of Midian tremble. Are you angry at the rivers, Lord? Is your wrath against the rivers, or is your fury against the sea when you ride on your horses, your victorious chariot? The second reason we see Habakkuk singing and worshiping God, or one of the reasons I would say, is because in this, as he's worshiping, he's being reminded about God's faithfulness in the past. Now, you may have just heard me read that or read that on the screen and said, Mike, where did you get that? Or hear him saying, God comes from Teman. And you're thinking, where is Teman? And why is God coming from there? Right? Well, to a reader like us 2,000 years later, that can be a bit confusing. But to someone that would be reading this in Habakkuk's time, they would immediately really understand what he's saying here. This Teman is southern Palestine, and the Paran Mountains lie kind of further south on the edge of the Sinai Peninsula. And this area that Habakkuk is describing here is the area where God began the formation of the nation of Israel. This is the place where Israel found refuge from Egypt, where they found deliverance from the Egyptian army at sea. This is the place where God begins to act and move in these incredible ways to form what the Israelite nation is going to become, who they're going to be. And so Habakkuk is looking back and worship, and he's remembering the times that God went before his people as a warrior against their enemies, as a warrior against their oppressors, the Egyptians in the past, and remembering that as the Babylonian armies are coming down on them, as they're getting closer and they're about to conquer, he's remembering that God has done it before and God can do it again. God has healed and saved and been a mighty warrior on their behalf before, and he can do it again. And so it's this wonderful reminder of God's faithfulness in the past. And this is, River Church, this is why it is so important for us as Christians to write down or celebrate or just make a huge stinking deal about when God has been faithful to us. About when God has been kind to us, when God has been good to us. We need to write it down in our journals. We need to mark it. We need to put it in our calendars. We need to remember it, because in the future, when we face trials again, it's going to encourage us to look back and remember what God has done in the past, so we can be reminded that we can have faith that he can do it again. Not just to remind us, but also to encourage others, that story would encourage others, right? Just like Habakkuk's story is encouraging us today. And then finally, it helps us to worship, right? Just like Habakkuk, he's remembering what God has done in the past, and he's worshiping him for it in the present. He's glorifying God for it in the present. He's honoring God for his faithfulness in the present. And so Habakkuk sings. He sings because he's been changed by God through this experience. He sings because God has been faithful before, and he's trusting that God is going to be faithful again in the future. As the Babylonians come to them and conquer them, he's trusting that God is going to be faithful again. Verse 9, he says, "You took the sheath from your bow. The arrows are ready to be used with an oath. You split the earth with rivers. The mountains see you and shudder. A downpour of water sweeps by. The deep roars with its voice and lifts its waves high. Sun and moon stand still in their lofty residence at the flash of your flying arrows. At the brightness of your shining spear, you march across the earth with indignation. You trample down the nations of wrath. You come out to save your people, to save your anointed. You crush the leader of the house of the wicked. You strip him from foot to neck. You pierce his head with his own spear. His warriors storm out to scatter us, gloating as if ready to secretly devour the weak. You tread the sea with your horses, stirring up the vast water." I don't know if you guys are catching this, but Habakkuk is on fire, right? He's shifting now from God's faithfulness in the past to worshiping God for his incredible strength and might and power. He's worshiping because he is a God who has the ability to defeat all enemies. He's saying no one can stand in the Lord's way. He is powerful. He is mighty. He is a warrior. He is King of Kings. He is Lord of Lords. And man, in difficult seasons, we need a reminder of that, don't we? We need a reminder of that. In a pandemic, we need a reminder of who's in charge here. In a day where we're seeing social injustice all around us, we need a reminder of who's in charge here. As we're heading into a season of elections that are going to be divisive and frustrating and even hurtful to so many people, we need a reminder of who's in charge here. that God is the King of kings and the Lord of lords, that He is victorious over all, and above all for us, He is our God. And so Habakkuk is remembering this in his worship. And I think, one of the most interesting things about this section and the last section is that it's almost the opposite of how Habakkuk had been thinking in the previous chapters. Like suddenly he's remembering who this God is that he's worshiping. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about worship, is that it reminds us the truth of who God is. Because one of the most challenging things for us in difficult seasons is simply to remember the truth, right? Like we begin to believe lies, and we begin to let the enemy creep in and tell us lies, and we believe it, and they hurt us, and we fall, and they upset us, right? And they depress us. And here Habakkuk is worshiping God. He's being reminded of the truth. He's being reminded that God has always been faithful. God has always saved His people. God has always protected His people. God can do it again. God will do it again. The God that I serve is strong and mighty. He's a warrior God. He defeats evil. He has always been victorious. He is the King of kings, right? He is the Lord of lords. And Habakkuk is, as he's worshiping, beginning to be reminded of this. And he's remembering. And it's like, I could just see him writing this down or singing this, and he's just getting pumped, right? Like even as the enemy is upon him, he's getting pumped. Right? It's because worship reminds us the truth of who God is. And that's why River Church, in difficult seasons, we got to worship Jesus. We got to worship Jesus. We need to sing about the truths of who He is. Even if you're not believing it as you're singing it, as you sing it, God will remind you of its truth, and He will help you, right? There's times for me as a Christian where I've come to church, even as a pastor, and I've been carrying heavy burdens or fears or anxieties or frustrations or doubts, and they're just, you're just on your shoulders and just feel weighed down. Like even as I'm about to go preach, like on a Sunday morning, right? I'll walk in and everything's great, and you're seeing everybody, but I'm sitting there in the sanctuary or the auditorium, and you just feel that weight on your shoulders when it's there. You probably are funny hearing me say this, but remember, I'm a normal dude, right? I'm a normal person with a normal relationship with God that has ups and downs and fears and doubts and anxieties, just like anybody. And so there's been days that I've come to church and I sit and worship with those burdens. And as I'm singing with our congregation, as I'm singing with our band leading us in worship, I'm singing these truths about Jesus and who He is, and reminded of those truths in worship. And you just feel the burdens get lifted, not because anything's necessarily different, right? Not because a circumstance has changed, but because I'm reminded in worship who my God is. Who it is that I serve, who it is that goes before me, and just what He's capable of. And so I come and I have those burdens lifted, and then it's easy to get up and preach, right? It's easy to get up and talk about Him. And I think we need worship for a lot of reasons, but especially that reason, because we need to be reminded in difficult seasons who God is. And I think, if I'm honest, that's probably been one of the most difficult things about this season, is that we haven't been able to gather as a church body and do that together, because we need that, right? We need that. And just as a reminder, that's going to be ending soon, right? We're going to have an opportunity to start worshiping on Saturday night starting September 12th. So don't miss that. If you would like to come be a part of that, we'd love to have you. We still want you to be safe and be comfortable. So if you're not comfortable gathering together, that's okay. We'll still have this going right here. But we're going to have the opportunity coming in just a few weeks to begin worshiping together at a local church in Watauga on Saturday night, so be on the lookout for that. But it's worship that is so important because it reminds us who God is. It reminds us the truth about who God is. It builds our faith. And it's, it's not that reading your Bible can't do that. It's not that prayer can't do that. Both of those things do that. There's other, graces, means of grace that do that for us. But there's something just special about worship where we sing truths about God, and it's like His Holy Spirit just comes and meets us and just ministers to our hearts and reminds us of who He is. And it's just something so unique about worship. And so in difficult seasons, we've got to worship. You see how it's helping Habakkuk. We've got to worship in difficult seasons. And so Habakkuk is going to finish this song here, this wonderful song of worship, with a final confession of trust. He's been battling with this in his heart and his mind, this whole book, right? This whole book of Habakkuk, this whole series, and he's finally going to settle it. He's finally going to settle it in his heart, and it's beautiful, and it's one of my favorite passages in the entire Bible. And so let me read it to you. Verse 16, he says, I heard and I trembled within. My lips quivered at the sound. Rottenness entered my bones. I trembled where I stood. Not quite encouraging yet, is it, River Church? He says, now I must quietly wait for the day of distress to come against the people invading us. Though the fig tree does not bud, and though there is no fruit on the vines, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, though the flocks disappear from the pen and there are no herds in the stalls, yet I will celebrate in the Lord. I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. The Lord, my Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like those of a deer and enables me to walk on mountain heights. You see, Habakkuk looks at this situation and he's still scared. His body is shaking and he's anxious because he doesn't know when the Babylonians are coming to conquer, but he knows they're coming, and so all he can do is wait. And so he patiently waits for the day that they will be here, but he says, in the meantime, while I'm waiting, I'm going to trust. And I'm going to believe what God has said. And he says, I'm not going to trust my initial perspective here, but I'm going to trust in the power of God, which is going to allow me to wait in faith. And so Habakkuk resolves here that I'm going to be joyful even, not superficially joyful with my head in the sand, ignoring everything, but joyful because he knows the truth. And not just the scary truth, not just the truth about the Babylonians coming, but the truth about God. And so the bigger truth, he can be patient and wait with confidence and faith. And then he uses this symbolism of things that represent prosperity, right? When he says, the fig tree does not bud, no fruit on the vines, the olive crops have failed. And when he says this, he's saying, I'm going to sing for joy. I'm going to sing with joy, even when the simplest signs of God's favor are absent from my life. Even when the simplest, most basic needs aren't there, I'm going to sing for basic needs aren't being met. I'm going to sing with joy, right? He says, I'm going to worship despite the lack of prosperity. I'm going to worship despite the lack of this seeming blessing in my life. He says, I'm going to live by faith even when the future feels uncertain, even when I'm suffering. And he says, I'm able to do that. He's able to do that because his joy is found in something completely different than the Babylonians' joy who are approaching, right? The Babylonians trust their prosperity as their foundation. They trust their wealth, their comfort, their power as their foundation. Those are the things they put their trust in. But when they lose those things, they lose their foundation. And the world is just simply too unpredictable to put our trust in those type of fading things, right? Habakkuk, however, has found something deeper to put his faith in. He's found something deeper to be his foundation. He has faith and trust in God, not circumstances. And so I would say that's why it's so important for us as Christians to have a deeper understanding of the purpose of our relationship with God, because if we view God as just the genie in the bottle who blesses us and gives us, favor and good things, then as soon as we lose those blessings, if we lose our finances or we lose whatever those material things are that we put our faith in, we lose our foundation. Right? We lose our foundation because it was the stuff, the safety, the blessing that were our foundation. But Habakkuk here has a deeper foundation. His foundation is in something bigger. It's in God, whom he can trust, find joy in all circumstances, because he knows God will be faithful all the way through. But hear this, faithfulness, River Church, doesn't always mean prosperity. You hear that? Faithfulness from God doesn't always mean prosperity. It doesn't always mean the bank account is full. It doesn't always mean the blessings are outpouring over and over and over. Faithfulness is God walking with us, carrying us through, God being faithful in all circumstance. Faithfulness, and we mix this up sometimes, faithfulness isn't always prosperity, which is why Habakkuk is able to finish and say, I want to read this again. Though the fig tree does not bud, And though there is no fruit on the vines, or the olive crop fails and the field produces no food, though the flocks disappear from the pen and there are no herds in the stalls, yet I will celebrate in the Lord. I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. The Lord, my Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like those of a deer and enables me to walk on mountains' heights. This trust enables Habakkuk to look at the coming Babylonians and the suffering in the face. And even though it's hard and scary, he's able to do it with confidence and trust and even joy and worship, because his faith and foundation is in God, not circumstances that come and go. He worships because he has been changed by his experience, because God has revealed himself to Habakkuk in this experience, and it has changed him. It has made him a different man. He worships because God is strong and mighty and good and sovereign, and he is a God that has always been faithful in the past, and he will always be faithful to his people in the future every single time. And Habakkuk worships because now, even though the fig tree doesn't bud, and even though there's no food on the table, though pain is coming, he can rejoice because God is the God of his salvation. God is the God of his strength, and because God is his foundation. River Church, in these difficult and uncertain times, again, where we're seeing injustice come to light, where we're seeing a worldwide pandemic that just keeps on going, with an election coming that is dividing families and friends, with an economy even that is shaky and scary right now. May we press into God. May we chase him and seek him so much that we are changed by this season because of him, right? Don't let us leave this season of suffering or pain or uncertainty. Don't let us leave this season unchanged by God. Let God use it to change us and heal us and sanctify us. Don't you leave this season unchanged by God. In River Church, may we remember God's faithfulness in the past. May we remember his faithfulness in our own lives and in the lives and stories of others, that it may fill us with faith and confidence in our God. And may this time be a testimony and a story that we tell in the future to encourage and lift up other people when they face suffering and trials. May we look back with joy on 2020 at how God was faithful and good to us, because River Church, he has been faithful. And he has been good, and he has been generous in the middle of everything going on. He has been faithful to us. And River Church, may we worship God because our foundation is not in stuff or prosperity or blessing, but our foundation is simply in the God who gives us salvation. Our foundation is the God who gives us strength day after day after day to keep going and keep going and keep going, even when it's hard, even when it seems hopeless, even when it seems like everything is against us. He gives us strength to keep going forward, that we can walk through any circumstance. And may we have joy even in these times, because he is our peace. He is our peace. God and God alone. River Church, I love you guys. I miss you. And that is my prayer for you today, that we would walk through this season well, that we would be changed by God, that we would be reminded of his faithfulness, and that in the future we would tell of his faithfulness during this time to others, and that he would be our foundation, and he would be our foundation alone. I hope this story of Habakkuk has been helpful to you. I hope it has encouraged you. I hope these last 5 weeks have impacted your life. I hope you're a different person even than you were 5 weeks ago as we began this story. I hope your faith, your relationship with God is deeper. I hope you have more confidence in him and more trust in him. River Church, I love you guys. We have some exciting things coming up for our church. Again, we'll be meeting soon together. We're continuing our search for a facility for us to purchase, and so some exciting things happening there. Don't forget about our great resources online at theriverdfw.com, where you can worship with your kids today through our kids ministry, where you can worship through your tithes and offering and even give to that building fund we've been talking about, and where you can find encouraging articles to help you through this season in life. River Church, I love you guys. I will see you soon.